This is the Detroit Sports Podcast Network.
The biggest icon in podcasting.
Welcome in, everybody, to this week's episode of Doc and Jock on the Detroit Sports Podcast Network. I am the Doc, John McEnroe, joining me, as always, to recap the biggest news in Detroit sports, the dismissal of the OG of Detroit sports, Monty Williams, my guy Adam, the Jock Strozinski. We were just talking. Typically, Adam and I will record on a Tuesday or Wednesday, depending on the schedule. We have opportunities to discuss, when we're going to fire up the microphones, turn on the lights. That's the blessing of being able to record when we're ready. And sometimes the luck factor hits you, and sometimes it doesn't in regards to breaking news, especially when you're pre-taping something. But, man, was it wild on Wednesday morning. I was sitting down, typing, writing some line stuff, and all of a sudden, boom, Woj bomb! And the whispers were there that the longer it took for Trajan Langdon to talk, that maybe the discussions were about a buyout or discussions about potentially moving on from Monty Williams, and then it happened. It was announced. Look, nobody's surprised. When you win 14 games in the NBA and you look disinterested and you don't mix and match the lineups properly, you don't fight for your team, you look like you don't want to be there, or, as is the case, sometimes perception is reality. The perception was that Monty Williams was aloof. Boom, gone, with over $60 million still left on his contract. And we talked about it either last week or a couple weeks ago. Whether or not, look, we'll never know whether or not he intentionally did this. There was going to be something where when you get a safety net like that, does it really matter that you get fired? I mean, I'm literally celebrating for the man. I'm like, holy cow, the man has been fired twice and has walked away with $80 million, and he's got people in the league shilling for him, saying that he should take the Lakers job. I mean, are you kidding me? Monty, look, I'm happy for you. Very rarely would somebody come on and be like, I'm happy for you, dog, but my God, when you get $60 million, or basically 1 year, $73 million to coach, you have hit the pantheon of OG status, like you're on the Hall of Fame of sports jobs, because literally you got paid $60+ million to leave. And many people will say, well, you left a real shitty situation. So you look at it and you say, for Monty Williams, yeah, the sting of it, whether you were surprised or not, when you get those checks, you can live comfortably for the rest of your life. I think everybody in some way, while that's not what they aspire to be, in the end, once you get dismissed and you can look back on it a year from now, that's the best thing I've ever heard in life in sports. Tom Gores, I think, in my opinion, cuz when I heard the news, we're going to talk about it, I thought he got incorrectly praised. It was crazy to see what people were talking about in regards to some of the narratives, but I'm so curious your reaction, because you and I have been talking about it. When you heard the news, I think from me, that Monty Williams was dismissed, what did you think? What does this mean for the Pistons?
I was blown away, because you go back just hours earlier, I sent you a rundown, and we were talking about Monty Williams possibly being retained. And we had to kind of go back and scrap stuff and kind of rework our show for the day. So I was blown away. There were a lot of reports that started to circulate that it seemed and it sounded like he was staying. And then all of a sudden you get this bomb dropped on you early Wednesday morning. I was flying around. I was filming some stuff for the news. And all of a sudden I looked down at my phone on my way back to our headquarters. And I seen that you had texted me and you were like, hey, we gotta redo this, because Monty Williams just got fired. And I was like, holy crap. And then, it all started to kind of pour in. Look, I want to say that this is a bit of a shocking move, but I really feel like the writing was kind of on the wall. The way that this whole process has been done with Trajan Langdon has been weird. There again, another weekend, still no press conference. Trajan Langdon hasn't been introduced to the media. Yet Trajan Langdon has fired a GM, and now he has fired a coach. And we're still just sitting here waiting, trying to figure what all is going on. At this moment in time, I'm under the assumption that we're going to have just one giant press conference, and that's where everything is going to get laid out and everything is going to be answered. It'll be with Tom Gores, who, like you said, I believe was incorrectly praised. This is a guy who has regularly screwed things up, and ever since taking ownership of the Pistons, he has continued to degrade this franchise. This team once had one of the most beautiful stadiums in all of the NBA. This guy shilled and moved it downtown, and now he shares a hockey arena for his NBA team, and it basically turned what was a once proud stadium arena into basically a demoed gravel pit out in Auburn Hills. And you look at what he's done. This is now what he's going to be hiring his 6th or maybe his 7th coach since he's taken ownership of this team, which is mind blowing. This roster, I don't think, has been in worse shape. He does have some cap space, so that's a bit of a bonus. But I mean, this team has struggled to do things the right way, and I think you can look at the Trajan Langdon hiring kind of as a microcosm of just struggling to kind of get out of your own way. Again, you hire a president of basketball operations. Again, we haven't been introduced to him. He's on the job and he's making moves. The reason we even know he was hired was because of his LinkedIn and his social media sites. That's how we found out. But I mean, still fires a GM, now fires a coach, is hiring other coaches for a staff that doesn't have a head coach. So to me, it screams of kind of getting in your own way. I mean, my hope is that this does work out. And look, I think the broader topic here is, how does Detroit fill this head coaching vacancy, or what do they do to fill this head coaching vacancy? And I'm going to tell you right now, I feel like this is going to be an incredibly difficult job for Trajan Langdon. I think this is going to be a hard job to sell to a lot of coaches. I think you are looking for a very specific type of coach when you go to fill this role. If you look at what the Pistons have, if you look in the draft this year, yes, they have a top 5 pick. That's normally great. You're normally excited about that. But this draft kind of sucks. There's not a lot of guys. I mean, I don't think you want the first overall pick in this year's draft. This draft is rough, to say the least. You go into next year's draft, and the preceding years after that, you've got picks that are promised to the Knicks. So at some point over the next 3 years, you might be losing that first-round pick. So your future draft capital even has question marks. Then you transition over to this roster that Trajan Langdon is inheriting, and there's not a lot of guys who are shooters on this roster. And with the way the NBA has progressed and tracked, it's a much more offensive game. It's not as defensive as it was back when the Pistons were running shop in 2004, 2005, 2006, 2007, where they were a mini dynasty, constantly making it to the Eastern Conference Finals, making it to the NBA Finals, and winning a championship. It's no longer that way. It is much more a three-point game. It is much more a ball rotation game. You've got bigs that no longer occupy space in and around the basket. They are now stretching everything out, and they're able to shoot threes. You don't have guys like that on your roster. Your number one overall draft pick from a couple years ago, the guy that you were looking to build around, in Cade, one, hasn't been very healthy, and two, he's not a great shooter. He is your prototypical pass first point guard. That is what he is. He's not a guy who's going to put it up for a high clip, and that's what you're looking for, I think, in this realm of the NBA. That is what you're looking to add. The other guy who's on this roster that I think everybody's really high on is Jalen Duren. Jalen Duren's not necessarily the most offensively gifted guy out there. I think he's a fantastic player. I think he's a really good role player. I think he has the upside to possibly be one of your big threes, but you're going to have to get a lot more out of him. So is there a coach who sees that and can do that and develop that? And you kind of start to work your way through this roster. Besides it just kind of being deprived of shooters, you've got a bit of a of a bunching at the top. You've got to figure out what you're doing with Cade. You got to figure out what you're doing with Ivy. You've got to figure out what you're doing with the bench on this team. You've got to figure out what you're doing with different pieces. Like I said, the big bonus here, the big selling point, I think, to all of this is they do have cap space, right? They do have cap space, and you can go out and you might be able to add a couple of guys. I don't necessarily think this is a fantastic year for free agents. I think next year might be better, but this team's going to have to spend quite a bit of money to get to the basement of the NBA salary cap. And then you factor into what Trajan Langdon is already doing, and that might tip the hand as to where he's headed. And I think you have a name that you've dialed in on that you want to talk about, and that might be the direction this team goes. And that kind of leads me to my other point. I feel like this roster is going to, or this team is going to have to go to a young up-and-coming coach. I don't think an established coach is going to want to come here because, like I said, you've got Trajan Langdon going out and making coaching hires before he even has a head coach. He went out there, and I believe it was last week, he hired Fred Vinson, who is basically a shooting guru. This is a guy who worked in New Orleans, worked for the Pelicans, and he was able to bring him here, and he's hoping that he's going to be able to utilize his skills and his abilities to get more out of this offense. But you've got a general manager now making coaching staff hires. So I don't know too many head coaches that are going to jive with that, are going to want that, where they're getting the oversight from their president of basketball operations, basically putting their staff together for them. So I think this is going to be a difficult job to sell. It is going to take the right candidate. And like I said, I feel like it's going to take somebody who is young and who is hungry and is up and coming. And possibly they're going to have a relationship with Trajan Langdon in order to get this job. Like I said, I know that there's a name out there that you are incredibly high on. You've got a couple of other names that you feel could fill this vacancy. So tell me a little bit about this guy that you have circled and earmarked for this position.
Well, it was interesting because we had some time, and I looked at it and I said, okay, well, first and foremost, I think that you definitely should always pay attention to the championship teams. So pay attention to Dallas and Boston, where Boston dominated with shooters. And you just seen Al Horford could shoot, Porzingis could shoot, everybody on the floor could shoot. Shout out to Xavier Tillman winning a ring, former Spartan. And you look at it and you say, okay, if there's anybody from those staffs that are interested. But at the same token, now with time, I say, you know what? I say that you look at, and it kind of hit me a little bit, and I don't know if he'll do it, but I think this coach, to me, is going to be a transitional coach. This organization is really at the bottom, and you've handed it over to Trajan Langdon. He probably will turn his attention to somebody from the Pelicans, somebody that he knows, but I would take a swing at Hurley. I think when you coach young players at that level, it's no easy feat to win multiple back-to-back NBA titles NCAA tournaments, and now you're tasked with being an NBA champion. I'd say take a swing, and maybe he's not ready, but at least float it out there that you go and you try and get one of the top college coaches, a young coach that understands young players, because I think the way in which we're going to talk about how they rebuild it, I think that rebuilding in free agency rarely works in Detroit. Rarely do you buy a team here in Detroit. It's mostly been done through the success that we've seen. I mean, the Red Wings had the opportunity, but they had a core. They had a led by Steve Yzerman. So it wasn't like they bought it. They supplemented it with more talent for sure, but they had a core. And you look at it and you say, okay, Yzerman, Fedorov, they were a core. And the Tigers, they had a core, Verlander, and they supplemented a lot of the talent that was already homegrown. And you start to recognize, okay, maybe it's not Hurley, but maybe you look at somebody from the Pelicans, somebody like a James Borrego, who's spent the last year as an assistant with New Orleans, who understands everything. He's been a head coach before with Charlotte, back from 2018 to 2022. He was part of a rebuild, so he kind of understands this. And he's also somebody that's considered a top offensive mind. Maybe, when you look at it, which was also a reason why many people were surprised, is that you already made a hire of a guy that was a shooting expert. And you realize, okay, he was previously under Monty Williams' staff. So, nope, it didn't have no tie. Monty Williams was still dismissed. So maybe a James Borrego is intriguing. Maybe a Sean Sweeney, who's the head of he ran the defense for the Dallas Mavericks. I still think that you need an offensive coach. So I look at it and I say, you go out there and you handle business and you find somebody that can teach these young guys how to shoot. And he can be a nice transitional coach to teach these guys fundamentals of spacing, how to get talent here that knows how to shoot. And you just look at, probably somebody, age 35 to 45. What Boston did with one of the youngest coaches, 35 years old. And you saw the way that they played, just ferocious. They could take an ass whooping in game 3 and come back and still light up the points and play in front of their home crowd to a degree in order to win a title. So I'm impressed. I'm curious, would you swing for a J.J. Redick? Would you swing for somebody that also is tied to the organization before an arm talent client? Or would you just say, look, let's go free and clear? Who's somebody that's maybe on your list as well? Because I would take a swing at a Hurley. He's the best. And obviously the pressure of going to the Lakers didn't appeal to him. But coming to the Pistons, why not? Or because clearly what has been blowing up our mentions at Detroit Podcast when people talk about it, do you just say, all right, make an offer, bring Chauncey home? He represents the Dan Campbell of the NBA, and he represents understanding the core, understanding the values of the Pistons, understanding exactly what's needed. Do you bring back Chauncey? Because to me, he's had some success with Portland, but not enough to dictate this job. I think this job is, like you said, tremendously challenging. I don't think Chauncey is ready, but part of me says, you know what, Chauncey or Hurley could have a nice transitional run where at least we get to 30 to 40 wins. Just get us up a notch is all my expectation. I have no expectations for what happens because I agree with you. The job's going to be tough, but we just need somebody to teach these players how to space the floor, rebound, shoot, and consistently close games out because that's where they struggled last year.
Yeah, a couple things you said that I really agree with. I think this will be a transitional coach. I think this will be a guy who's going to kind of come in and clean up the mess that has been left from Monty Williams' predecessors and from Monty Williams, as well as the mess that Troy Weaver left with this roster. So I think this whole entire franchise right now is in a bit of flux and is in a bit of a transition. All that being said, I'm not willing to necessarily go the college route. I don't want Hurley. I don't want J.J. Redick. Those guys can stay where they're at. I think J.J. Redick's a fantastic announcer. I think he does a fantastic job commentating on the game. I think he's got a really interesting podcast. I think he does a lot of good work with ESPN. I think Hurley does a great job in college. You have to remember too, when you're a college coach, what you have control over is putting together your roster, putting together your team. You are basically the alpha male. When you go to the NBA, you are not necessarily the alpha of that locker room. You are the general. You're the leader of it, but you're not necessarily the alpha of it. You've got guys who are in there who are basically the leaders of that team, and your job is to design plays to put them in the best position possible to help you win games. So I think when you have a big personality like he does, and when you have a very outspoken personality like he does, I feel like that could rub a lot of players the wrong way, and I feel like that could blow up in your face. And I think at this moment in time where the Pistons are, they need to go with something a little bit safer. I basically gave you a list of things that Trajan Langdon has done thus far this offseason in regards to trying to kind of formulate a bit of a staff and blowing out some of the old staff and just things that he could help sell this job on, which leads me to this one candidate. There, in my mind, there's one guy that Trajan Langdon is looking at, and it's one guy that I'm assuming he's had conversations with because they have a history together. There's one guy that I think everything is pointing to at this exact moment. Now, mind you, this is incredibly fresh. You have Monty Williams getting fired just hours ago in this day. And look, even Monty Williams has come out and said, look, I was blindsided by the timing of all this. Woj has just tweeted some stuff out regarding Monty Williams and how he was surprised by him getting fired right now. So I think everything kind of points to James. I'm going to mess up this last name. I think it's Borrego. Borrego was a assistant coach down in New Orleans. He was a guy who everybody praises his offensive mind, seems to be a guy who has a good vision and comes with a very good offensive game plan. This is a guy who's worked on different staffs. He comes from the Greg Popovich tree. He's worked in San Antonio. Then he moved over to New Orleans. That's where he had a bit of a run-in with Trajan Langdon and how their relationship was kind of established. Now you factor in them bringing in Fred Vinson, who also worked in New Orleans. Like I said, I feel like there's been a bit of a conversation that has been had, and they've had a little bit of discussion, and Fred Vinson was kind of that first block to fall, and now you've blown out Monty Williams. So maybe they've come to an agreement upon a deal, and that's why it was safe for Monty Williams to now get fired, and now why the door is open for James Borrego. So in my mind, at this moment in time, Trajan Langdon has him circled and has him earmarked for this position. Again, like I said, I feel like this position needs a young up-and-coming coach. Like we both agree on, it's probably going to be a transitional guy. This guy is an offensive-minded coach. We both agree that they need to really hone in on the offensive side of the ball, because the league has switched from a defensive-first style of play to a more offensive style of play. And again, this guy looks like he's got good coaching chops coming from Greg Popovich. I think we both agree Pop is a fantastic head coach, and he's got a relationship with Langdon. And I think that's where Langdon wants to go. So in my estimation, that is the big name right now. I do want to get your sense on what do you make of Woj's recent tweet where he basically said that Monty Williams was blindsided by this. He was not prepared for this. He didn't see this coming. He had been in multiple meetings with the Pistons as they were trying to put things together for their offseason here, and was basically tracking towards being the head coach for the Pistons next year.
Yeah, there's it's plausible. I don't know if it's realistic, because I don't think it'll ever be reported, but it's being spun that Tom Gores made the decision, that he evaluated everything, and he made the decision 24 hours prior to Monty Williams' dismissal. And maybe Trajan Langdon was willing to say, look, maybe it was kind of like that wink-wink, like the conversation happened before Trajan was hired, where, look, what would you do? And Trajan would be like, look, given my opportunity, I'm willing to do whatever you say, but I think that any new president deserves to hire their own guy. And then Tom looked at that and said, okay, I take some information in. And he looks at everything. He asks. It takes everybody, 50 years to answer an email nowadays. So he probably sent out 50 emails. What do you think of Monty? And then 2 weeks later, everybody said, "Ooh, we don't like him. He's gruff. He was distant. He was aloof." And so he got all that information, and everybody gets together and is like, "Okay, let's spin it so that Tom looks great. Tom made the decision. He evaluated everything, and he said that this was something that was going to be needed." So I think that it's very plausible that Trajan strung him along and was talking, actually, really, what's smart, cuz, is to just pick Monty's brain. What do you think about the roster? Why did you guys fail? What do you think about this? Oh, okay, yeah. What do you want? What do you think this roster needs? And you at least get the opinion of Monty Williams, and then you fire him. So I could see that happening, where you don't tell the coach, you don't lead him on. And plus, because the coach could say, well, I'm getting paid. I mean, it's very rare that people get paid plus $60 million to leave. So Monty's probably gearing up, and he's like, okay, I got one more year. My sentence is one more year, and then I'll get fired. Because a lot of people would not begrudge. I mean, they'd frown. A lot of people would not begrudge Trajan to sit back a year, survey the landscape, take a free year, and understand what's going on. Learn from Monty, learn from everybody else. But I just think that when it was all said and done, if you're Monty Williams, to have it spun like that, I guess, is what you have to do. But when you have a losing streak of over 25 games, that's on you. You failed no matter what to reach the locker room that you're coaching. No matter what. Even if you're the best coach, if you lose 28, 29, 30 games in a row, setting records, embarrassing yourself with your rotations, then there's no other option for you than to really recognize, well, I did a shitty job. And there's a new person coming in. They always want to hire their own people. So I just think that, in this day and age, you just send shit out to reporters and just say, hey, I was blindsided. I was prepared. And that's the way it goes. But I will ask you this, because in looking at the spin, I was kind of shocked at the cheerleading that some of the media did for Tom Gores. Look, the man's a billionaire. $65 million is nothing. He makes that in a month. That's nothing to him. It didn't take much for him to do it because he did it. I don't give him credit for firing the guy. I mean, he has the money. Now, if he kept him, would I be upset? Not really. But at the same token, you don't get credit for wiping away one of your errors. You get blamed for paying a man that length of a contract and that much money when I think you probably outbid yourself. You probably could have got him for $9 million or $10 million or take it or leave it. You don't want $9 million? You don't want to be the second highest paid coach? Fine, bye. You were desperate, and I think it's much more of a stain on, if I'm looking at it from an accountant's perspective, like, man, you just gave a guy $70 million for 1 year of work to do nothing. Literally nothing. So you don't get credit from me, and you don't get a victory lap. Well, applause, he's not being cheap. Look, at the same token, it's a 100,000% demerit that you fucked up so bad that you brought in a guy that didn't want to be here. And now you got to cover it up and pay a man to leave. So that is something that is embarrassing. So for the media that's just championing and going, oh, congrats. Yeah, I'm happy. I put out a tweet at Detroit Podcast, happy that he got rid of a bad coach. But at the same token, when you evaluate it as a whole, it is, and probably will be assessed that Tom Gores is a bad owner. So what do bad owners need to do? Fine. Trajan, handle the job. I'll step back, and I won't say a word until it's time to evaluate again. Tom needs to step back. I would think if you're Tom Gores, you don't stand up there and take those questions. You just sit back and put out a statement like you did when Monty Williams was dismissed. You just say that last sentence over and over. We're committed to the pursuit of sustained success of the Pistons. We will work diligently in order to restore the Detroit Pistons to where they need to be. And you don't need to take the heat. You just sit back, let Trajan be out front, handle the business. What are you going to say? Tom Gores sounds ridiculous when he talks, and the media could easily make him look real silly. So if you're Tom Gores, you just apologize for the last 6 years in a 2-paragraph statement. We've tried diligently to bring back the Pistons. It has been a colossal disappointment. We will work diligently with the new era to reunite everybody in an effort to bring winning basketball to the Pistons. ! Hashtag restore the roar. Hashtag restore the floor. Keep it moving. Hashtag Pistons. And I don't want to hear from him again. He's not a basketball mind. He's a check writer. That's it. And when he talks, it doesn't instill any confidence in me. It just lends me to when he speaks, my brain goes, oh, that guy sucks at his job. Oh, that guy just has a lot of money. How the hell did he do it? Or that guy has a lot of good and people around him to help protect whatever it is he's got going on. I hope that phone thing clears itself up. A fellow Spartan too. It's embarrassing. I don't understand the people that were giving Tom Gores so much credit. Great, you fired a shitty coach. It doesn't take too much brain cells to figure that one out, cuz.
Yeah, for sure. I don't think you get credit for cleaning up your own mistake, right? This right here was a Tom Gores stamp, seal, delivered error. Tom Gores made an offer to Monty Williams. Monty Williams said, no, I'm good. Tom Gores then got on a plane, flew to Monty Williams' house, and was like, here, I'm going to quadruple whatever the offer was. Take this. And at that point, Monty Williams was like, I would be stupid to say no to this, right? Like, I would be dumb to pass this up. And so you made him a Godfather deal. He couldn't refuse. He took it. He came here. Heart was definitely not in it. Mind was definitely not in it. The only thing that was here was his body, and half the time that looked like that was checked out. And then you go to basically remove him, and you're on the hook for $65 million. I think the stat is there are 4 Pistons ever that have been paid $65 million or more from this organization. 4 Piston players. And you have a head coach that has made that. Because Tom Gores is like, yeah, I'll just write that check. Like, you could even work out a buyout with him where you're like, look, man, we'll just give you 20 and you just go on your way. We'll call it a day. Everything's good. Tom Gores is like, nah, I will eat that whole check. Like, To me, Tom Gores is just a bad businessman. How he is as wealthy as he is blows my mind, because he has shown that he is one failed mistake after another. Just look at what he's done with this organization. It is abysmal, absolutely abysmal. I totally believe that this guy gets by on the backs of other people. The hope is now that he can get by on the back of Trajan Langdon and help make this organization proud once again. But like you said, I don't want to hear him talk. I don't want to see him. I don't want to see him even at the stadium on the sitting courtside. You're right. Every time he makes a public appearance or he speaks publicly, he is an absolute embarrassment. Like, the words that fall out of his mouth, to me, it seems like he's one concussion away from having CTE. Like, he just seems like he's a NIMT and just somehow has been able to float by and make millions of dollars. Like, if only you and I had that kind of luck, it would be unreal. Like, I feel like we could dominate the world if we had that kind of luck, because neither you nor I are a NIMT. We're pretty smart guys. This guy, every time he shows up, he just kind of opens his mouth, removes all doubt that he is a complete and utter boob. And like you said, I don't want to see him, don't want to hear from him. And I really wish the league would step in and force him to sell. I know it's not realistic. I totally get it. I just wish, I desire that. But yeah, at this moment in time, your mouthpiece for the organization is your new president of basketball operations. At some point, I need you to introduce him. It's going to be interesting to see how he sees this team evolving, because I do feel like he's got to turn some of this roster over. Like I said, they've got a ton of cap space, and they've got to spend a lot of money to get to the floor of the cap. So there are going to be guys that are brought in. But all that being said, you've got to flip a bit of this roster over. You're going to have to go out there and you're going to have to trade away some of these pieces, because you seen it last season. It just doesn't work. What you have just doesn't work. And whether it's Cade, whether it's Ivy, whether it's Duren, whether it's, I don't know, insert player here, you're going to have to trade somebody. And hopefully you can get a guy back that you can pair with one of these two guys, and you can get some production out of them, and you can get a team that you can start to build around. You can get a core that you can start to build around. And like I said, bring some free agents in, try to pair them up with some of this roster, and get some guys who can contribute on the offensive side of the ball.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see how long it takes for the Pistons to get back to respectability. Trajan Langdon's got a job to do. Next week we'll talk more about the draft. It's going to be very fascinating, a look at really building from the ground up, and just real simple. You need shooters. You need to figure out what you're going to do with Ivy and Cade. You need to build around the talent and dispose of those that cannot play, those you recognize cannot space the floor properly, cannot be part of this long-term rebuild. I think the Italian player they added, I think, has a chance. He's a shooter. I think that you look at, really, if you hit on the draft and a couple free agency moves, you're going to have some free agent dollars. I think you're going to add one or two players in free agency. You get a nice draft. Maybe you look to the future by trading Cade and getting for another first-round pick, or trading an asset. Maybe it's Ivy is the more realistic approach. With calculated moves, there are opportunities for the Pistons to get back to where they need to be. And that's what it is. This fan base is passionate. They still care about the Pistons. They're still riled up. They're excited. It's a new dawn, new era. And now hopefully Trajan Langdon will understand exactly what it takes to get this Pistons team off the floor, because they've been super kicked and they've been embarrassed. And hopefully when the opportunity presents itself to address the media, that he can answer the tough questions regarding, man, why would you take this opportunity? What's your vision? How long does it typically take for a basketball team to get off the ground and handle business? Real fast before we start talking about the Lions, the Oilers, 2-game winning streak, back to 3-2, going back to Edmonton. People that were writing off Connor McDavid have some egg on their face. What are the odds you think Oilers come back and win it?
I mean, look, man, they have looked really good the last couple of games. Offensively, this team is no slouch.
Right.
I think the obviously the strength of this team is with their forwards. Specifically, their top two lines are incredible. Their defense is really the Achilles heel of this team, and more specifically, it is their defensemen, basically 4, 5, and 6, that kind of hamstring them a little bit. I still see Florida winning this. I never thought this was going to be an easy series. I always thought this series would go at least 6, maybe 7 games. So it doesn't surprise me that we're here. I think what you've seen in Tuesday night's game, you have a Florida Panthers team that is scrappy. And you have a Florida Panthers team that if you give them a little bit of breath, they are going to come at you and they're going to try to strangle you. The thing is, they fell into a bit of a hole on Tuesday night, and it was really hard for them to climb out of it. I think Bobrovsky looks a little unsteady since he got shellacked the other night when they ended up winning. I think it was 8-1 was the final. He let in a lot of soft goals. He looked a little bit out of sorts. I thought they needed to pull him after he let up the third goal, just to kind of get him out, give him a breather, just be like, look, man, shake it off. You're going to be okay. To me, he looked a little bit rattled going into what is that, game 5. So to me, I think they'll be fine. I think they bounce back. I think it would be really, really sweet if they end up beating Edmonton in Edmonton, and I could see it happening. I think Edmonton's going to have a little bit of pressure on them. You have to remember, too, it's been forever since a Canadian team has won a Stanley Cup. So they're playing with a country's pressure on them. It's been since 1993 when the Montreal Canadiens won. So they're playing with the entire country's pressure on them to win the championship of their native sport, of their home sport. So that's a ton. You're going to be at home, another bit of a pressure cooker. Again, I've already told you, I feel like offensively they're incredibly gifted and talented. You have defensemen on that team that sometimes just get spun around and lost. They really kind of hang Skinner out to dry. I think Skinner's an okay goalie. I don't think he's great. I can see Florida coming out and being ravenous, and I can see Florida winning this in 6. If not, I think they take care of it in 7.
No way. It's destined. Connor McDavid will single-handedly bring the Oilers back. I got a chance to catch. I don't know, I guess Twitter made changes. You can't go back to find people's likes, but I'll share it with you. There was a great Oilers video back in the day that I grew up to. It was Wayne Gretzky My Way. I used to go to the library and rent it for free. It was great. It taught you how to skate. I love the intro highlight package. I don't know if you've ever seen it, but some dude posted it in full. And I was like, oh, hell yes. I love it because it talks about Gretzky's 50th goal in 39 games. All the first 3 minutes are just so legendary that I love it. Oiler history, I don't follow him clearly. Obviously with Ken Holland, I know about Connor McDavid, but I grew up with the Wings and the Oilers in the late 80s when I was 9 years old. The back-to-back series losses, I think in the conference finals that the Oilers went past with Gretzky. That's how I became a big, huge Red Wings fan and hockey fan, was growing up learning about the NHL was the Oilers keep whooping on the Red Wings. And so the Oilers represent NHL history. Look, Canada's taking it rough. And I think that once they figured out Bobrovsky wasn't, God in the net, I think it's coming, cuz I think the Oilers are going to hoist the Stanley Cup. They're going to dominate Game 6. And Game 7, please let it go to overtime. And Connor McDavid can be the hero of all heroes to win it for the Oilers. But, I would also think, too,
for all of Canada, not just the Oilers.
Yeah, all of Canada. The entire country be national hero. But I could see Game 7 and then Florida coming back and also, handling business. It's hard to win 4 straight games. And I think, is that, I know it hasn't happened in basketball, I don't think, but has it happened in the NHL? Has a team come back from down 3-0? I don't think so.
I'm positive it has. I mean, I don't know.
Yeah.
Me being the hockey guy, I should know. I don't know. I can Google real quick if you want to set up the next
still
topic.
To this day, no team in NBA history. I feel like it might have happened once in hockey. Let me see, 3-0 NHL and see what went down. Well, of course, what pops up, the Toronto Maple Leafs rallied from down 3-0 to beat the Wings in 1942.
2010, the Flyers did it. 2014, the Kings did it. Yeah, there's a ton of teams. Yeah,
okay. So it's not as historic. So then that means I can stand strong with my take. Oilers, baby, let's go. Hoist the Stanley Cup. I can't wait to see what ends up happening when we record next. But at least they made it a series. It would have sucked if both would have went 4 or 5 games. The NHL finals now have some intrigue. But I will say this. major disappointment to Oilers girl for not, doing the superstitious
showing
thing.
her hoo-ha's.
You got to do what you got to do. If you did something and they advanced, you got to do it again. She did release a video and was like, if you didn't like what I did, F off. And I guess she's been taking some judgment. And look, I mean, you got to remember when you do stuff like that, half the world is conservative. They're not going to like you. So you might just want to kind of stay away from social media, but you need to do it. You got to take one for the team. You did something like that, you got to do it again. You got to make sure, you got to ensure that these Oilers win. And the video is great. She's like, dang, I got drunk and whipped out my titties, and that's what happened. And I'm like, well, yeah, most people are not going to like that. So you understand that social media is not the place where you need to seek approval. You just do what you do, put it out there, and walk away. Because if you're seeking approval, there's some great tweets that we've put out where people have been like, this is terrible, this is awful, you're terrible. I'm like, oh, okay, never mind, sorry. Next question. All right, before we get out of here, the Lions did it. They added, and I have a hard time, because clearly Jake Bates is an individual with a big leg, but he's already been in a camp and didn't make it. He's shown some of the reasons why with his inaccuracy late in the year outdoors, missed some kicks. I think the competition's real, clearly, by giving him a 2-year deal. I think the reason why it's a 2-year deal is he probably had competing offers that he probably would take at 1 year from the Commanders or Green Bay, and he probably realized that he probably had a more realistic chance of competing when you had James Turner and Michael Badgley, the incumbents. I think the extra year gives them a little bit more, helps the Lions with the cap space, and it helps them. They gave him $150,000, which is kind of like a UDFA guarantee. It's not like something that just makes him the starter. Part of me says it's PR to just sell some attention because, look, he's great. He generated buzz. I think he can be coached to play. I think they just want to bring him in, see the leg, and see him compete because he is different than Badgley. But to be honest, I have a hard time not feeling like James Turner got the raw end of the deal here. He performed well from what we saw, but as accurately as others have said, there were a dozen other practices we did not see, so there's more assessment that we did not get a chance to see. But I thought that James Turner deserved to be in the competition, but you rarely see 3 kickers in a training camp competition. So I'm okay with the big-legged kicker. A lot of positives on the side of Jake Bates to win the competition if he has a lot of good opportunities in training camp. If he plays well. Plus, what he has on his side is many people think that, hey, the Lions are not going to be pressured too much by playing outdoors. If you get a kicker that gets hot for 1 year and he can kick it from 60 yards and you love his leg, well, you have an opportunity to have some more confidence, kick some more field goals. But I just don't think that. I feel like Jake Bates is one more year of development away. He's a former soccer player, and he's kind of learning his way through. I think it kind of had basically, to use a baseball term, I don't know, we don't want to besmirch this week's podcast by talking about that baseball team in Detroit that can't score, but it kind of has the feeling of a call-up that's 1 year too soon. Just like, oh my God, he had a good 2-weekend series and he's batting .300. Let's bring him up. And then you realize, oh, this guy needs a lot more seasoning. I feel like Bates needs a lot more seasoning. He's got the intangibles, but I didn't think he was ready to be a training camp member, especially when you saw what Turner was able to do, and especially with Turner kicking in some pressure moments in college for Michigan in pressure moments. So do you think it was a good idea to bring in Jake Bates? He causes a lot of buzz. People are loving it, and people are really excited to see what this Michigan Panthers kicker can do for the Lions.
I like them bringing him in, but I like them bringing him in and there's competition there. I don't like them getting rid of Turner. That doesn't make any sense to me because we already know what Badgley is, right? We already know what he brings to the table. And if we're being completely honest, he's not necessarily the guy that you want to go into the season with. He's a leg, but he's not a very good leg. He's not very reliable. I feel like with Bates, you get kind of the same thing. If you look at his stats when he was in the USFL or the UFL, whatever we're calling it now, he's a little bit inconsistent. He's a little bit inaccurate. Yeah, the leg is long. The guy can kick it from 53. Guy can kick it from 64. He can kick it from distance for sure, and he can make it from there. But when you really start to kind of drill down on where he's at, the guy for his career in that league, he's about a 73% field goal kicker. I mean, for the season, including the postseason, For the Michigan Panthers, this guy kicked 21 of 28 kicks. That means he missed 7. Badgley basically gave you the same thing. I feel like you have Turner there. I feel like Turner is kind of the wild card. Turner might be great. Turner might not be great. Turner might be incredibly accurate, 45 yards and in. And I'm going to be honest with you. If that's what you are, that is fantastic. You will take that all day long. I know that Bates can kick it 60, almost 65 yards. I seen the kick where he kicked it 64. That thing would have been good from about 67 or 68 yards, no problem. So I get it that Bates can basically kick it from the other side of the field. I totally understand that. But if you're going up there and you're shooting at about a 70% clip, I'm going to take the guy who's incredibly accurate from 45 yards and in instead of the guy who's going to make it 7 out of 10 times from almost 70 yards. I feel like with this team and the way that they are built and with the coaching staff, you get near midfield, you're going for it on 4th down anyways. And with the confidence that Jared Goff has in this offense and the guys that he has, I feel like you're going to execute that 4th down 9 out of 10 times. And I'm probably exaggerating here and I'm probably a little overconfident, but I feel like the majority of the time you're going to execute that and you're going to get that field goal kicker a shot once you get within 45 yards. And if Turner's the guy, then Turner's the guy. To me, letting Turner go was kind of the red flag for me. Because if I was to let any one of these guys go, it would be Badgley because I already know what he is. And there's a good chance that you could come back and you can pick him up and add him to your practice squad or add him to your roster anyways because the league knows what he is. I think giving Bates the 2-year deal to me was a bit of a red flag. I think giving him the 2-year deal tells me that it sounds like this coaching staff kind of has its mind already made up, and it's going to be up to him to fail horrifically for them to try to waive him or for them to try to cut him or for them to move him to their practice squad. To me, it really feels like Bates is the guy going into the season. And look, I feel like it was a fantastic story. I feel like his leg in that kick was absolutely great. I don't know if that's the guy who I want kicking a field goal when this team is in the playoffs and you need 3 points in order to win. You need the trust and the confidence of the coaching staff to wheel you out there so you can try to win a game so you're not going for it all the time on 4th downs. If you go back to the playoff game against San Francisco, if they go for it one time and kick a field goal and execute it, we're talking about something completely different. Instead, they didn't have any faith in their field goal kicker, so they did not. And if you're going to go out there and miss kicks, I don't think this coaching staff is going to trust you. I don't think this coaching staff is going to have the faith in you where they're going to wheel you out there and they're going to put you in that position to where you could win a game. And I think it's just going to be a bit of copy and paste from what we had last year, just with a guy who can do it from a little bit more distance.
Yeah, it's the King competition is really intriguing with many people paying attention intently to what's going on because of Dan Campbell's aggressiveness, his kind of not using Michael Badgley last year as much as maybe he could have. So it'll be intriguing to see training camp. And when training camp starts in late July, the rookies report on the 20th, veterans on the 23rd, and you have an opportunity to go out there when the open practices take place to go out there and see for yourself. What do you think about Jake Bates? What do you think about what's going on with the kicking situation? Is Michael Badgley being undervalued based on the fact he didn't miss a lot of kicks the last couple years? I think in the last 2 years he's only missed 4 kicks, but many people don't have confidence because of the fact that Riley Patterson beat him out last year. So it'll be intriguing to see how this all shakes out with the kicking situation. Now, heading into training camp, what improvements really have caught your attention? When you look at the roster, there's been kind of some turnover, obviously, at wide receiver. You see a turnover in regards to really the overhaul of the defense with the defensive line and the secondary. And you see the roster in regards to, the defensive tackle, edge rusher, linebackers. And I just think that when you look at the roster, do you think it's been upgraded enough to give you confidence that they deserve to be the word contender, as Taylor Decker described in a one-word description of the 2024 season when he spoke to ESPN? You can check out a snippet of what was said to ESPN at All Lions. Do you think the Lions legitimately deserve to be called contenders based on the upgrades they made this year? And I think they do. When you look at it, there's no roster that's perfect. I do think that the biggest question mark will be, wide receiver 3 and the edge position opposite of Aiden, who steps up to get those sacks, to pressure? And the other question mark will be who the players that we expect to develop, Jamison Williams, Broderick Martin, the likes of a Manu. How do they start to progress? How do they start to look in training camp with some time on task and things like that? Does Jamison Williams actually get out on the field? A lot of different layers of players. You got Broderick Martin, kind of the second-year player that hasn't seen the field that much. J-Mo has more experience. You got Manu, really raw, kind of like Broderick Martin was last year. But I look at the roster and I say, yes, this team deserves the title of contender, top 5 team. But now, contender's one thing. Do I think with this roster right now that they can overpower the Chiefs? Defensively, I have question marks because Carlton Davis is new to the situation in which he's expected to kind of be the number one. He's kind of always been the complimentary defensive back. He's really good, and I would not be surprised if he makes that step. Tyrion Arnold and Ennis Rakestraw are rookies, and you might have a kicker that has never kicked in high-pressure moments before at the National Football League level. So those are things that should, we're not here to scare anybody. We're not saying it's not a playoff team, but when you realistically look at it, it's a contending team, but I just think that maybe just not enough when you look at and also too, it's just really credit to the Chiefs and credit to what they got going on in the AFC with Joe Burrow, with Lamar Jackson, with everything going on in the AFC. It's going to be something to get to the Super Bowl, but it's a whole other animal when you think, could the Lions actually take down an AFC team in the Super Bowl? But I do think that the Lions upgraded at a lot of spots, and I think the cornerbacks, when you look at it, are totally different. And I do think that clearly Tyrion Arnold's better than Jerry Jacobs, and I think Carlton Davis has his head on right and doesn't have legal problems as of now. So he's much better than Cam Sutton, who found his way a job. So I think that there's an opportunity for the Lions to make some noise this year.
Yeah, I think cornerback is a position where they definitely upgraded. I think one of the areas where I've seen the most upgrade, the most impact that we're going to get on the field when the season rolls around, the area that I'm focusing on the most is going to be that defensive line. And specifically, it's going to be that interior defensive line. For me, I feel like Aleem McNeil is DJ Reader 2.0. I think DJ Reader's fantastic. The guy is great against the run. I think he's very good against the pass. I think Aleem McNeil has showed you as the last 2 seasons have kind of progressed. He's gotten better and better. And I feel like this guy has potential star written all over him, and he's ready to explode onto the scene. And now you pair him with Reader, and I feel like Aleem McNeil is the mini DJ Reader. He is the 2.0 version of DJ Reader. And I think with these guys, as long as they stay healthy, there's the big caveat, as long as they stay healthy, because DJ Reader has had some pretty horrific injuries, that interior of that defensive line is going to cause so much havoc and is going to cause so many problems. It's going to drive quarterbacks nuts, and it's going to drive running backs absolutely crazy because I just see them collapsing that pocket and taking away a lot of those inside runs. If you are going to run on this team, you are going to want to somehow seal whoever the edges are. You're going to want to somehow get to that second tier and block off those linebackers and try to get down the field that way, because I feel like those 2 big bodies up front are going to be a dramatic game changer for this team. That is where I think you're going to see a gigantic leap forward with this defense. I think that group, specifically those 2 guys, are not only going to help a guy like Aiden Hutchinson on the edge, but I think it's going to also help a guy like Carlton Davis. It's going to help a guy like Tyrion Arnold. It's going to help that secondary because those guys are going to be putting so much more pressure on the quarterback. Quarterback's not going to have enough time to let the play develop downfield. The quarterback's going to have to get the ball out quickly, and at that point, your cornerbacks, if they are athletic enough and they've done enough study, they should be able to jump that play, either intercept that ball or knock it down. And I think it's going to have a dramatic impact on how many plays this defense is on the field for, and I think it helps them get off the field quicker. But it's that interior of that defensive line, it's the addition of DJ Reader, and it's Aleem McNeil taking that next step in his development. You have to remember, too, This is a contract year for McNeil. McNeil is looking to cash in, and I think playing alongside DJ Reader is going to not only make him a better player, it's going to make him a more productive player. So I'm interested and I'm excited to see those two guys get on the field.
I am too, very much so. I think that this year with the offseason, one of the most exciting, most anticipated training camps for a long time. And I think that when you look at the Detroit Lions, all the excitement with Dan Campbell, the offense really has the potential to be tops in the league. The biggest question mark will be, can the defense gel and get together quickly to enable this football team to compete at a high level? And I think the greatest thing is opening up against Matthew Stafford. Sunday Night Football, the whole world will be eyeing what goes on opening day with the Detroit Lions. And we'll be here at the Detroit Sports Podcast Network to break it all down. All right, before we get out of here, world news. We're going to put Adam in the judge's seat. Judge Adam, you get to decide. You're the emperor, you're the king, and you get to hear this case. I'm looking forward to hearing what you think. A man in England is suing Apple for $6.3 million for a costly divorce. Here's what happened if you don't know. A man from England is suing Apple for over $6 million, claiming the creator of the iPhone caused his expensive divorce. An anonymous person, whose story has been reported in England, said that his wife found out about his infidelity with sex workers through their shared iMac, which contained his iMessages even after he erased them from his iPhone. He didn't know that his texts are synced between multiple devices using the same Apple ID, so he was shocked when his significant other discovered that he was texting hookers. And she found out. He erased the text. Slick. Good job, Slick. But the situation is that Apple does not erase your text across multiple devices. Does this man have a case? Is he dumb? Or does Judge Adam give this man $6.3 million for technology fucking up his life?
This guy is an absolute idiot. Look, I'm siding with the wife. You're a moron. You need to be smarter and be better. Do not attach your phone to your iMac and use your iMac ID. Like, you just got to be better if you're going to be a degenerate like that. There is no way in hell that I'm siding for the wife here, or for Apple or whatever it is. This guy is at fault for his own divorce. And at a certain point, you have to be responsible for your own actions. I think that's part of the problem with this guy. And I think it's part of the problem with society in general. Not enough people are responsible for their own actions. Be responsible for your actions. You're out there texting sex workers and setting up deals with hookers, and your wife finds out. You're a scumbag. Come on, man. Figure it out. If you're not happy in your marriage, go someplace else. It's fine. Don't go doing, like, let's be for real here. This guy is an absolute buffoon. And I think Apple, as much as I don't even like Apple, I'm siding with Apple. And I am siding with the wife. And this guy should be forced to pay her a ton of money. And he should be liable for all of Apple's legal fees in this case. This is unreal to me. I can't believe that this has made it this far. I'm surprised the judge hasn't thrown it out.
Denied. Well, look, it's civil, and, when it comes to the court, they love the business. And I look at it like this. Apple is responsible, but not for $6 million. I just think that they need to upgrade their technology, and it is very beneficial. The idea of a deleted text is, hey, I need this gone. I don't need this being present, but not for the use of potentially texting sex workers. Yeah, you got caught. The universe conspired for you to be in trouble. You don't get $6 million, not from Judge Adam, and I don't think he's going to get it from Apple or a settlement or anything. He just wants punitive. He's looking for someone to blame, projecting out his problems that he has in his decision-making. And cause you look at it, I mean, I think all wise people that want to be shady just get two phones. Duh. You don't share information. Who shares an iMac with their significant other? I mean, if you want to do the shady stuff, I just think that you need to get two phones. Yeah. Or for those of us that have two phones that people question you, I am above that, above the fray. I have two phones because I have two distinct businesses, and they cannot be commingling. So I just think that this individual is, like you said, an idiot, and this is a hilarious lawsuit. You can read more on it. I sent it to you, and I think that you are so far 1-0 in your decision making. I might listen to the case, be entertained by it. So I'd ask the missus, what did you find out? What kind of sex workers was he hiring? Why did your husband need to go to sex workers? And it'd be funny to cross-examine both of them and wonder what was it like the moment? What was it like when you found out that you got caught and you thought they were deleted? Oh, that would be very intriguing. So something to follow. News of the weird, as always, in regards to the world, as people try to seek monetary damages for their own self-liabilities and their own selfish acts. Make sure you follow Adam on Twitter at AdamRSTROZ, the honorable, the fair-minded Adam the Jock Strozinski. Follow the network at Detroit Podcast. If you disagree, if Apple is at fault and you need to have your shit deleted everywhere, I could hear that argument. Message us at Detroit Podcast. Look forward to next week where we break down the Tigers, what's going on, their losing streak, their offense has been atrocious, what's going on with the Pistons, Lions, we're looking at different key burning questions as we approach training camp. So much more in the world of Detroit sports that Adam and I have opinions on, and we'll bring it to you each and every Thursday, no doubt about it, guaranteed, on the Detroit Sports Podcast Network. Message us at Detroit Podcast. Like and subscribe anywhere you like audio content. Type in Detroit Sports Podcast, and our content will find you. Thank you guys for giving us this last hour. We appreciate you listening. Thank you to everyone messaging and enjoying the audio content. Just like and subscribe. 3 words, Detroit Sports Podcast. Our content will find you. I can't wait. I literally can't wait. We're stopping now. I can't wait until next week when we fire it up again for the next episode of Doc and Jock.
You fucking podcasters. I said don't let them in here.